So we've heard about various countries are deploying 5G technology, and that is super. But what are the issues actually causing problems or challenges to that deployment? And that's really the key thing we wanted to talk about. And I'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. Neopold, who's an independent spectrum expert who will be moderating this session. So, welcome.
Ask the panelists to join directly in the seat because I will present them in my introductory speech.
Do we need to be in order? We probably do.
Well,
it's very complicated. I'll go last. Is that, would you prefer it some other way, sir? Oh.
Okay. There's one missing, exactly. Right. This session is about the conditions for commercial success of 5G. This is a daunting task, as you probably all know, because the matter is very complex, and I doubt whether in 30 minutes we will find answers, but we can try. On top of this, we have heard elements in previous sessions, so what I will try to do is not to give answers in my introduction, but to give some sort of a grid of reference where we can categorize the different arguments we will find. So, commercial success of 5G is a very complex environment, and I've tried to give some categories of domains which might influence the commercial success. I'll list them here. Okay, so you see the headings and you see little details. Detailed subcategories. This is very tentative. This is my view of things. So you have on the left side pervasive and scalable infrastructure, stable technology as an ecosystem at affordable prices. These are the bases which you probably need for 5G. You need some applications. This is the green category, use cases. And I'm talking here about use cases which use the particular features of 5G. We have heard already throughout the day the importance of the regulatory environment. And we need also capacity of investments to finance the initial rollout of 5G. So the intention, how I intend to steer the case is that obviously deploying 5G has a potential of a global business, but at the same time, you also have strong regional or country connotations and conditions. And what I would like to explore with the panelists is the importance, to compare the views of the different regions and to identify, if possible, common priorities or things which should be done individually at regional level. And for this, we have a very interesting panel. I very briefly introduce the persons. Start from my list, Chris Person, who is from the 5G Americas. We had already done a presentation. Colin Wilcock, very much involved in the organization of this conference. He's the chairman of the board of the 5G Infrastructure Association. Mr. Dongku Kim, who is the chief executive committee 5G Forum in Korea. Mr. Dui King from Huawei will represent China, if I may say so. Then we have Jose Marco Camara Brito from the 5G Brazil project, and finally Mr. Yoshinori Omura from ARIP and representing the 5G MF Japan. Right. So what I would suggest is that since we are limited in time, that I give each of the panelists the opportunity for a, say, 1-minute statement. And I have asked them to look into 3 questions. First, what is for the respective region or country the most important condition for a commercial success of 5G? And added to this is, I would like also to get an impression how much consensus there is within the region or country on this priority conditions. Secondly, the question is, to what extent the identified conditions are dependent on the global development of 5G? And the third question is, we have seen there are differences in timing in launching 5G. Is this considered to be a disadvantage or a potential? So these are the 3 points. So I'll start from the very end, coming up here. So Colin, could you give us your view on this?
Oh, I'm disappointed I'm first. It means I have to think of something. Okay, let's go for it. So what are the key conditions for actual deployment? I think the first point to make is that it has to be commercially viable. So it's all well and fair to say, oh, why isn't Europe deploying everywhere? Why hasn't it already happened? But I think one has to understand that the key driver at the moment is businesses, big operators. And they need to convince their shareholders to actually invest and to do things. And so on the one hand, this obviously relates to things like spectrum auctions and how much we expect to get from the operators on that. But a company only has so much money. And if you're expecting lots of money for your spectrum from that company, and you're expecting that company to invest huge amounts of money to deploy the new network, at some point that becomes an issue. And above all else, we must remember these companies need to stay healthy. If the companies go bust, it helps no one, and 5G go nowhere. So that, I think, is perhaps from a European point of view. I could pick a dozen other subjects, but maybe that's the one I would like to emphasize. How much is that dependent on the global industry or the global situation? It actually is dependent on that in so much as we need a global standard. The reason being is fundamental economics says the more of something that you produce, the bigger number of things identical which you produce, the cheaper you can produce that. And what that means is we need a global standard, so the market for the devices, but also the networks and anything else we build is big enough that the costs come down, and when the costs come down, then it becomes commercially viable, and the first instance that I talked about is then satisfied because the network can be rolled out because the cost has been brought down. And that is one of the worrying things that we see in the political landscape today, where we see more individual political blocs perhaps not agreeing with each other or not trying to do things in a cooperative way. In 5G, we need one standard, one technology. And we have to work together to create that. And I think this panel shows the sort of things that we need to be doing. We need to be talking to each other and coming to some consensus and some compromise. The last point on timing, funnily enough, I think only time will tell. So, which is a kind of a strange answer, but you can see that from a marketing point of view, having something out now, saying, oh, we've launched 5G and it's wonderful, that is a great marketing message. But there is, of course, the question of the 5G you deploy today, does it actually cover the use cases, these new vertical markets that we all agree are the vital things? Does it actually have the technology to actually cover those use cases? And I would suggest if you look at the standardization, there's a real question there, because the standardization is really just massive broadband today. So it might be an advantage to deploy early because people have something to play with, or it might be a disadvantage because you install something that you'll have to replace in the future to actually get to the promise of 5G.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll turn west. I'll ask Chris maybe to intervene now and to give us his view. I think he has already given some of the elements in his previous speech, but maybe you will want to comment on these 3 questions.
Sure. I mean, I think it's kind of a mantra, I think, for my association and even myself is, you want commercial success of 5G, you're going to need more low, mid, and high license spectrum. I mean, it's the key element. It's the lifeblood of our industry. And in the Americas region, and I know each region has their own different challenges, is you really need to look at, how do you get to network density, which is really about the cell siting processes. And we have to find a way through, to have the government, whether it's, local, municipalities, as we call them, or cities or counties, really embrace the fact that, connecting your citizens is a good thing. And I think in the Americas region, there's been a little bit of a pull and a push and a tug of war with cities and carriers or tower companies. And so we need to, really work on that thing. But those really, as far as enabling the ecosystem for 5G success, those are the kind of foundational elements, because you have to have network density and you have to have enough spectrum, licensed spectrum, low, mid, and high, to be able to fulfill some of the really technical enablers that will give 5G the innovation that it's going to be.
Okay. Any comment from your side on the advantage of doing an early start, or to wait maybe for maturity, to put it at two extremes?
Yeah, I think it's good to be early. I mean, most of the companies that are out there, launching early are actually learning about the technology as well. I mean, it's not like you launch your technology and that's it. So being early and a leader, I would say, is a good thing, but that doesn't mean it's not a long game. It's like, we're here in Europe, and football is the #1 sport, and you might be ahead 2-1 at halftime, but it's when the game's over or further down the road, you really see what the result is going to be. So I'd say it's a good thing to be early, but it's a long game. And these operators and their vendor partners, they're always learning. Whether you're early or not, you're always going to be learning. So if you have a commercial deployment, there is the marketing item of it, of course, but I'm just talking about from a technical side. Being early, you're still learning all the time, even if it's a commercial deployment. And you're also learning from your customers, whether it's a vertical or another type of, or just a regular consumer. Is this valuable to them, and what's going to work with them?
Okay. Can I ask Jose Brito maybe to intervene, just to join in from the southern side of the West?
Thank you very much. I would divide my talk in two kinds of conditions, the global conditions and the local conditions for the success of the 5G. In terms of global conditions, I think the applications are the key. I think we need to develop applications that make the 5G attractive to the vertical markets. And we also need to reduce costs of the network, reducing costs of the radio bases, base stations, and also of the infrastructure of the network. For this, sharing resources in the networks is a very important point to see. Harmonization of the spectrum harmonization is, of course, very important also, and not only for enhanced mobile broadband applications, but also for IoT devices, mainly if the IoT has some mobility application like wearables or something like that. In terms of Brazil, we have some particular problems. We need to have some tax relief for IoT devices, and also for the 5G for remote area scenario. And you need some simplification in the process of licensing for RF devices for IoT in order to reduce costs. I think reduce costs is very important. And also you need new rules for installation of radio bases in some very practical aspects in the municipalities in the country. In the last point, I think to the success of the 5G, 5G needs to be a ubiquitous technology, present for everyone, every place, any place, and so on.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go east. Mr. Omura, I would like to listen to your points. I have listened to the presentation of your colleague from MIC, and having followed a little bit the mobile sector in Japan, I was accustomed to enthusiastic calls for new technology development and spread, and I heard a much more cautious message, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can enlighten us a little bit.
Yes. So,
Push the button.
three panelists is a perfect answer on the questions. So I have no words to add any other comment on. So I have another aspect on not technical and business, but a little bit spiritual. So I think that the important condition is to show or declare the message on the utilization of the 5G infrastructure. So in case of Japan, so we are facing three serious social problems. One is so according to the forecasting long-term 50 years forecasting the population of Japan. So one is the shortage of productive age and rapid aging. 65 years old elderly will be 30% of the population, and total population is declining. So therefore, the shrinking of the local or regional economics is remarkable in particular. So 5G infrastructure is useful for solution of these problems. New technology, which AI, big data, and robotics are collaborating to solve the social problems, new business model, just like 5G innovations. So that is my comment on,
Okay.
on your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Kim, the case of Korea. So here we heard, not only heard, but saw also enthusiastic messages of what is happening in Korea and the pickup. So it's all about virtual environments, dancing, pop stars, sports, etc., etc. Are these the key factors behind the commercial success of 5G?
Part of, I agree with you, but actually right now we are more focused on the consumer side, right? But when we say about what's the condition of a 5G commercial success, we can think of them in both consumer side and industry side. And I think much of the consumer side has been pretty much addressed by Samsung, Mr. Warren, and previous many speakers. So I like to more focus on the industry side. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think it's safe to say that the 4G actually drove content Big Bang. So it was mobile broadband. So I consume many YouTube contents. But I think in 5G, the area, we think that it's going to stimulate the service Big Bang. So I'd like to share some of two conditions that the 5G forum has been engaged in, especially at the early stage of 5G. So one of the things that we have to prepare for the service Big Bang, especially at the early stage of 5G, is that this might be quite a unique situation might be in Korea, but 5G Business Authority has been pretty widespread out to different ministry and different organizations. And not every ministries and not every organizations are familiar with 5G. So what we are trying to do, 5G Forum, is engaging in much of the effort to make it easier for them to better understand what is 5G. So I think it's very important for them to take 5G as one of the technical solutions in developing their R&D planning and the trials and also business and service use case. I think that's the beginning of to make a 5G business a success, especially in industry side. And if I may, I can also bring up another issue to make a 5G business success in industry side. I couldn't agree with more Ms. Wilcox. The next challenge we faced in Korea to make a 5G business success in the industrial side is we think that 5G is going to incorporate, we think that many of kind of interface protocol for 5G connection between industry IoT and the AI cloud. So what we're trying to do is we try to unify, as I told, the kind of a lot of possible tentative interface protocol as much as we can, so that we can have a kind of a scalable, big volumes of 5G module for industry side, so that the SME and the startup can have again a cheaper and simple access to 5G. I think that's the next step to make 5G business success in industry side. So I think so that is why the government, our government, is put out a 5G plus strategy. Mr. Wee from the ministry put out the plan in the early sessions. So we're looking forward to the every move to make 5G commercial success in industry taking its course in Korea. That's, I think, might be unique situation in Korea, but it's kind of a global situation, I think, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for these interesting remarks. And last not least, Mr. Liu Yingqing, China. So what is the recipe for commercial success of 5G in China?
Okay. Actually, I very agree. Mr. Corin said that I think the most important thing is the network. Who will deploy network? If there's no 5G network, no nothing, right? But now the problem is, let's see, look back that we started the 4G, the first 4G network in 2009, but the real 4G smartphone appeared in 2012. For most of the operators, they started the 4G operation like in 2013 or 14. For example, in China, China CMCC, they started the 4G, the real commercial network in 2014. So that means only after 5 years later, they want to start the 5G. So I think all of the MNO have very big financial pressure, actually. I think the one of the most important things is the government and regulator need to do a lot of supporting to the MNO, especially, for example, the reasonable price of the spectrum. I think this is one of the most good things we do in China. And a lot of other benefit, for example, the public facility open for the 5G network, or some other supporting. For example, even in one of the province in China, Jiangsu province, the local government will give some like the 50% of the discount for the power supply, the power consumption, power supply price. So I think this is to give more support to MNO. This is one of the most important things. The second one I want to say is the cross-region cooperation. So for example, like previous speaker said that in Korea, they are very powerful in media part, content part. In Europe, they have very good resource and content in sports. So how maybe we can input all of those things to China? So that's why in China, every year we have dozens of the summit or 5G shows. So we just found a lot of foreign company to have such kind of application, input the application to China market. I think this is also very, very important, because 1+1, one country can gather all the global resource. For the third question about the timing to the market, personally I think the earlier the better. It is because 5G, it is a totally new telecommunication model for the whole industry. So not too much consumer and the vertical company know that what is 5G, what is 5G. So for example, in 5G time, maybe the DOU, data of usage, will be 10 times, even 20 times compared to the 4G time. So what does that mean to a media company, the content provider? So I think we need to give more time to those companies to understand and to build their own new business model. So I think it's time to start the 5G business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me try to summarize what I understood so far before we go in the second round. I heard the quite obvious recipes for success. We need spectrum, we need standards at global level, we need to facilitate the deployment of the infrastructure, access to ducts, easier siting of base stations, etc., etc. But I heard also quite a lot of other aspects, not only from you, but also in other sessions, which are not so commercial and which are nevertheless quite valid. For instance, if you talk only about commercial success, you ask the question, how can somebody make money? Essentially, that's what it is. But there are other categories. I heard talks about the sustainable development goals, where 5G obviously has something to contribute. Difficult to monetize, but something. We heard about productivity increase, breeding small companies, which 5G could promote. Difficult to make money there, but very important. Not to speak from other things like progress in e-health, relieves the burden from societies. Communications raises the level of education. Mobility is a very important factor. All these are not per se areas where you can make money. So it's very easy, of course, to call for the governments, to put in money and to support this, and to a certain extent that is right. But how do we share the objective? Is it the right question to ask for the commercial success of 5G, or do we need to consider these other categories? The second point, which you might want to comment, is an issue of timing. So we heard the example of Korea with stunning figures of adoption of 5G, very much based on content, etc. And there is all-you-can-eat schemes, rather cheap. if I understood correctly, the message I heard here is there's, of course, the other side, which is the industry side, which is very important. And if I extrapolate this somehow ciphered messages, it would mean let's start with luring in a lot of people at low prices and start this thing and try to get enough stability in the whole business to then move to other objectives, which are much more lucrative, much more important, like industry. So my question is, do we need a phased scheduling of priorities in order to make 5G a success? And I'm not saying necessarily only a commercial success. And the third aspect is one of approaches. Again, very interesting, Korea. We started early to plan things, etc. Reminded me of the year 1994, where the European Commission launched an initiative called Information Society, and where all countries, Japan, Korea, also started. And in Korea, it was sitting down, government with industry, and dictating the plan. There would be a public network, there would be an industry network, and it was done, full stop. These methods are quite unthinkable in Europe, for instance. I don't know about the United States. So the question is, how do we go about this? What is needed? Do we need a leading authority to steer these things, or do we hope, that the whole thing is going to be breed and going to take off? These are the three aspects. Anyone wants to comment? Please.
It's getting dark outside, so I'll only pick one of the aspects. I think the first aspect you chose, where you're saying, well, a lot of the answers were about this needs to be a commercial success. So we should judge if we can use 5G based on can we make money. Problem with that approach is that is the approach we've taken with 2G, 3G, 4G. Okay, super. But the dream or the vision for 5G is actually far extended from what we've done with those previous generations. And if we really wish to tackle some of these fundamental societal problems, the aging population, the increasing urban population, the traffic jams, the e-health, if we want to actually challenge these things, purely using the commercial yardstick might not be the right way of going. To give an example, we could make a decision that we say, in 2030, no one is going to die on European roads. But to do that, what we'd have to do is we'd have to have coverage on every single road in Europe. So every kilometre we would need a 5G base station, and we would need the infrastructure to put that together. Trouble is, from a commercial point of view, if I look at a big operator, they're saying, God, the cost to put in that network, that would not make commercial sense for me. And indeed, the fact that a few of my subscribers do not die in road accidents will also not pay for such a network. We get to a point where, for those societal problems, we need to find some other source of finance. Now, whether that is government or conceivably some other aspect of industry. For example, maybe the operators aren't so interested if their subscribers don't get killed, but the insurance companies, the people who have to pay for the disabled and people who die in road accidents, they might be very interested. They might be prepared to invest. But as you rightly say in your further points, that requires some sort of central overview, some sort of way of bringing these actors together in a reasonable way. And that is actually a very difficult problem.
Yeah, thank you very much. Especially difficult because the actors who potentially could benefit indirectly from 5G don't know what 5G is. That's the problem. So it's a question of awareness of the potential of 5G. Yeah. Anybody else from the panel wanted to comment on my little teasers? Push the button. Yeah.
I would like to do a comment about the social aspects of the 5G. There are a lot of promises about 5G in terms of success in economic and social aspects. If you look only to the commercial aspects, you can reduce the impact of the network, of the technology. For example, in 5G for remote areas, is a very important point for Brazil. also in terms of social aspect, education, and some application in agriculture, but also in terms of economic aspects, in terms of agriculture applications, IoT and agriculture applications, so on. But for this, we need some special technologies to solve this problem. And now the 5G for remote areas is considered as another application on the top of the 3 scenarios for 5G. But it's not the solution. It's just an example of the application in case of Brazil. I think the non-grid spectrum auction is also a thing that could help the implementation of the 5G, looking for the social aspects.
Okay, please.
I'll be really short. I'm hoping we can get some questions from the audience, or no?
Well, originally the session was scheduled too short that there was no things, but I'm ready to skip any cocktails and discuss with the public if they want. You know, that's
So
open.
my big thing would be, just 2 things, real quick, and that is, I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive.
No.
You know, as you said, insurance companies, or actually the driver who might get a break on their insurance, if they have a fully V2X car, might be a benefit to them. Instead of spending $2 billion like cities in the United States do to do big tunnels, if you could go to them and say, instead of $2 billion, we'll move your traffic in your city by equipping every single car with a $1 sensor, and it will move traffic a lot less than the $2 billion that you're digging. So I just don't think they're mutually exclusive to say, that you can't be a commercial success and also help the social, economic, those types of things.
Well, anyhow, somebody has to pay for it. That's clear. No, yes, so you're right.
Yeah. But again, your city decides how to spend that money.
Yeah.
$2 billion on a tunnel or $100 billion on sensors, and to be able to manage traffic. I mean, these are the questions, or insurance. I think they're not mutually exclusive, and that you can, with 5G, do a lot of things you haven't been able to do that actually is good for the operator and their vendor partners, but also good for the citizens.
Okay. Mr. King, please.
Okay, I also choose one aspect about the face. So we ever said that the 5G, it is for not only for human, this is also for connected everything. But for example, one person, they can willing to pay $20 for per month for one connection every month. But for thing, I think we cannot pay too much. So that's mean when we start the connected thing business, the cost per thing will be much lower than one person. So I think for 5G, for the initial stage or initial phase, we think we still need to focus on the human person connection, because this is a huge business. I think even 10 years later, still this will occupy maybe 70 to 80% of the total revenue of the operator. So only when we do this EMBB or B2C service as big as possible, and then we can rapidly decrease the cost of the base station, of the smartphone, of the terminal, and then we can start to serve for the connected thing. So I think for the first before 2022 or 2023, I think most of the businesses come from the B2C, and then we started the B2B. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I understand. It will be a phased evolution. This being said, the thing you connect will not watch video, so it's fairly, that it's a little bit cheaper than if I use it. Yes. Okay. Can I ask, is there any pressing question from the public? We have microphones if somebody wants to comment. Doesn't seem to be the case, so you prefer the cocktails. Fine. Okay, it's difficult to wrap up because we are not going to find a solution, but I think we have seen some interesting aspects. I have not heard so much input whether we need a global, I mean at word level, global strategy, right? Apart from standardization, which is an obvious one. By the way, on standardization, a question which I would have liked to ask is the success or the recipe for success of 5G passing through access on fair, non-discriminatory basis of essential patents? We'll spare this one because otherwise we'll never get to the cocktails. Okay. It seems to me that my initial statement that the ecosystem is a very complex one is still valid. And if you see the vast range from IoT applications to the kid watching videos, that is extremely different and wide. My view is that 5G tries to provide a technical ecosystem to accommodate all. And I think and that I regret that it didn't come up, one of the key successes for 5G will be to push very much the adaptation and the flexibility of the network, network slicing, etc., because this allows to accommodate the individual needs for all the applications. And on top of this, it's possibly, and I ask the question to you, possibly a recipe for those who operate these networks to implement the networks on a much cheaper basis, a much more efficient basis. I wonder whether this is a valid argument or not. Last opportunity for you. Okay, yeah.
I agree.
Good.
Perfect. Let's leave it on that.
Okay, let's give a hand to our panelists. Thank you very much.
Okay, and first we should also give a hand to our excellent moderator. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've made it to the end of the first day, and thank you everyone for staying here who has stayed here. I appreciate it was a long day. I apologize there wasn't more chance for interaction, more questions, but I hope you appreciate that we tried to pack as much into the agenda as possible, trying to get as much information as possible across to you. Tomorrow is another exciting day if you look at the agenda. The only little problem is clearly you've deserved now an evening off. You should go out, enjoy the weather, cocktails, whatever else you choose. However, tomorrow we will start at 8:30. So don't celebrate too much. Huh? One cocktail is fine, two cocktails, iffy. The other thing to say is that tomorrow we'll actually be in the other auditorium. So 8:30, auditorium 2. I really hope to see you there. Thank you for your attention.